Okay, introduce yourself for those who might not know who you are.
Hey everybody, I'm better known as DOC TC5, and my alias Arab, ARAB.
Okay, so what borough and neighborhood are you from?
Oh, from the one and only Brooklyn, specifically East New York, home of the gods. That's where I'm from.
Okay, what is it like growing up in Brooklyn?
Same as growing up anywhere else. People try to romanticize and say, oh, you know, Queens was different, Bronx was different, Brooklyn, nah, it's all the same. I spent time in every part of New York as a kid, and we all played the same games and did the same things. So it was fine. But in my time, the only thing that was a little different growing up in an older New York, you know, New York had like a big gang era when I was a kid and a very, very hot racial era when I was a kid. But a lot of that has calmed down.
Okay, when did you start first noticing graffiti?
I really can't say, but I do remember kids in my elementary class doing it, and I even when I saw them doing it, I didn't associate it with any kind of organized graffiti. And then in like 75, 76, there was a kid in my class named John Aviles, and he was doing it hard. And I would look at him and be like, I can do that. And he'd be like, yeah, whatever. And I would just do letters right in front of him because I always could draw. But even then, I still never associated with graffiti. And he went on to become a writer named U2, YOU2. And he was down with the 56 guys. And then at one point I started maybe like in 77. I kind of put it together that this was a little bigger than what I thought it was, and that there was people all over the city doing it. And then that's when I decided, let me get a name and let me scroll my name on the walls in the neighborhood, in my building, back staircases. And by the summer of 77, I did my first piece on a wall. I did on the wall in the bleachers in the projects. I painted the back of my school, a couple of handball courts, and dudes around the neighborhood knew who I was. It was a good feeling, but my partner at the time was just like, yo, you gotta write on trains now. And I was like, that's not happening.
Okay.
I didn't see the point in it. I was like, that's just ridiculous. Like, I can just write my name in the neighborhood. Like, what more do I need? And my boy was like, no, you got to write on trains, and if you don't, you like. He goes like, what if somebody grabs your name, or what if somebody, he's like, you're just gonna miss the chance of getting up and getting your name known around the city. And I was like, I don't need my name known around the city. I'll paint in the neighborhood. I'm good with that. And he was like, all right. So one day in the summer of 78, no, I think the fall of 78, when we started high school. So he had been trying for a whole year to get me to paint the train, and I had no interest. And plus my mother was hella strict, so I really didn't want to walk that dog of putting myself in position to get arrested. And at that time she was dating a correction officer, so that really was, it just was non-void. I was like, why would I even tempt fates by putting myself in a position to get arrested? So we were on our way to school, freshman year, 78, and my partner's like looking at the train wall right behind me, and he keeps smiling. And I'm looking at him like, what are you smiling at? And he just pointed like above my head. And I'm like, what are you pointing at? And he's like, yo, bro, I told you that if you didn't hit a train, there was going to be a problem. And I go, and whatever, and he just keeps pointing above my head. So finally I turn around and look up, and right above my head was this kid named Doc 2. And I was like, oh, he wasn't joking. Like, it really happened. And I was like, all right. And he goes, what you gonna do about it? And I'll never forget, I pulled out a marker that I had in my jacket, and I crossed it out and wrote Doc 1 next to it, like on a crowded train full of people and going during rush hour in the morning. And that's what started the Odyssey, by the time we got to school, I'm like, how do you write on the train? Where do you write on the train at? What do you do? He was just like, don't worry, we're gonna go this weekend. I'm gonna take you. And I'm like, yo, I gotta get up. I can't let this dude, become the guy, with the same name as me. And it was all downhill after that.
Okay. Who were some of the names that you seen up at the time?
In my neighborhood, in just the neighborhood, I would see, like DYNAMITE 149, the FDT family. I mean, the 56 family, like FDT and 56 and Kid 56, and really a lot of Mousy, because Mousy was in the project adjacent to me. And Joe 61 lived in my project, and I knew him pretty good. And his partner Sonic would come through. He was a Sonic 002. Those are all elder statesmen that that we looked up to as kids, and and a bunch of dudes from I mean, there were names that never manifested. Like there was a dude in my neighbor used to kill. He wrote Cowboy, and I knew him. His name was Calvin, and he just wrote all over the damn projects and the buildings and everything. And some of the older guys from the TVC crew, like Deck 2 and Dusty and 2 Bar, guys like that. They were all, and JS. And we all kind of like jumped to the trains that same year, like between 77 and 78.
Okay. What year did you start writing?
Well, I will say officially 77, because that's when I did my first piece on walls. And my train career started in 78.
Okay. How did you come up with your name?
Oh, my mother gave it to me. Inadvertently, she was teasing me about future work careers. And I told her I wanted to be something along the lines of a medical technician or working with doctors, and she was like, yo, but you really like music, because back then I played bass guitar and I was a DJ. So she was like, how you gonna give that up and do that? And I said, I'll make it work. And she was like, well, maybe you could be a disco doctor. And I was like, dope. So it was my name originally was Disco Doc, and then I just dropped the disco, and then it just, But I think that kind of would have been my nickname even if I didn't write, because I got that nickname like in '76, and so, even if I had never picked up a spray can, my name still would have been Doc.
Okay. I assume you was in high school when you started. What high school did you go to, and was there any other writers that went to school with you?
Yeah. Well, initially, when it was time to pick high schools, I wanted to go to art and design, and my mother shut that down. And she was like, ain't gonna be no starving artists in this family, So that dream was shut down, and so I decided to go to a career high school. I went to Chelsea Vocational, And it worked out because there was writers there too, you know. And, so I met one of my future partners there, being one. And that worked out. That was a great partnership because, he put me up on all the uptown life that I was missing. Because the thing about New York being so separated was there were things that were happening in the Bronx and Manhattan that we just never got to see or be a part of. So, that is what usually fueled the bad energy between boroughs, was that we didn't know what each. So there would be somebody that was putting in work uptown, and we'd meet that person and diss them. Like, who are you? And they'd be like, well, who am I? Like I'm the man. And we'd be like, we never heard of you. It's like, yeah, because we from Brooklyn. We don't know what's going on up there. So by me going to school in the city, in Manhattan, and hanging out with uptown cats, I was privy to everything that was happening uptown, in the whole culture, whether it was music, whether it was dance, whether it was art, whatever it was, I was plugged in, and I wasn't just that Brooklyn cat that didn't know nothing except Brooklyn. I knew everything. So, going to that school, really plugged me in, because Beam knew a lot of the guys in art and design, and Mr. Fable's twin brother was in the school. So when me and him got cool, we would go over and meet his brother and then hang out to do some art and design. So it was almost like I went there, and that kind of helped keep me, plugged into everything.
Okay, did you ever street bomb? And if so, did you have a partner?
Nah, street bombing was never my thing. I didn't see any value in it. So you gotta understand something. During the train era, street bombing wasn't a necessity, because the ultimate goal was to go to this one place, write your name on the train, and let that run the city for you. So it just wasn't productive for me to walk around the city tagging and doing throw-ups when I can just go to one location, hit 2 or 3 different train lines, and my name was moving around the whole city. And most people felt that way in the old days. It was rare. There was a few rarefied guys like OE and P13 that wrote their name on literally every brick in this city, and that was their thing. And I would just look at them like, I could hit 2 trains and get the same effect. So it just wasn't me, and the street buff was a little more aggressive. So you go through a neighborhood, smash everything. Some stuff would stay up, some wouldn't. You hit a train, even if they buffed it, you're back there next week or the week after putting it back up. It was more effective to me to ride on a train than to do street bombing. So I never did it. And what's sad about the whole thing about street bombing is there are guys who dedicated their whole life to killing streets, and they're gone now. These are guys who put in thousands of man hours writing their names on every building all over the city. 2-3 years they're gone, like they were never here. And so it's like, as a writer, you got to pick your poison. I'd rather be a guy that went out and painted a memorable piece of artwork. Like, I did this graffiti piece, and it was so incredible that people came from all over and took pictures of it. People put it in books, magazines, film, photo. Now that's going to last forever, as opposed to the guy who goes out and just goes for sheer numbers. Everybody sees it, but guess what? Nobody's taking pictures of that stuff. There's nothing memorable about seeing a throw up 10,000 times. You don't want to take 10,000 pictures. But if a guy goes out and does 10,000 pieces, at least 5,000 of them are going to wind up on, being documented. So it's like you as a writer, you have to pick your poison. But the other side to that is some guys can't do pieces, but they want to be part of the movement, so that's what they do. You know, they street bar because they can get their throw up and their name up. They get props. Everybody knows them, and they just take it however it goes. You know, but me, my ideology was just completely different. I wanted to be historically documented. So, you know, my thing was always pieces, pieces, pieces. Even when I hit trains, I didn't do a lot of throw ups and I didn't do a lot of insides. So it's really like a joke for me. If someone comes to me and says, "Oh, I have a photo of a tag you did on a train," I'd be like, "Okay, put it next to the other 5 or 6," because I just didn't do it. I didn't do it enough where my tag will come out in photographs. So when someone shows me a tag of mine, I have maybe 4 photos of tags. And I did a lot more, but it's just a point that it wasn't enough that if someone was taking random pictures, my name would keep coming up. There's certain people who destroy to the point where even in stock photos of old New York City or stock photos of old trains where people just took pictures of them and their friends and they wind up as stock photos, there's certain writers that are always in those pictures because they killed it, you know. So I'm not that guy. You know, my thing was, if I'm going to get arrested, I'm going to do a piece. You know, I'm catching all the fame.
Okay, who are some of the writers that influenced you at the time?
Well, the first writer to like really influence me locally was a writer named DYNAMITE 149. He was a dude that had like a nice, really nice, simple style, and very readable, very big. He knew how to do, you know, how to render his colors. He knew which colors went with what. You know, he was very bold, and he could rock black books. So an old friend of mine lived on the floor in his building, and he introduced me to DYNAMITE. He was like, he kept looking at my books, and he was like, "Yo, there's a dude in my building that that well, not in my building, on my floor. He lived like 2 apartments over." And he was like, "I'm gonna introduce you to him, and he's better than you." And I'm like, "Oh, I want to meet him." And I was like, "Oh, this is the guy I've been seeing all over, you know, the neighborhood." And after him, the next guy to influence me was a writer named Fine 99. He lived in the front of the projects, and he wrote Fine 99 and Ronzel, and he had a really, really dope, expressive style that I hadn't seen before. Like his was like a couple of light years ahead of DYNAMITE, and I gravitated to him next. And I would ask him so many questions and about. He was just like, "Yo, the things you asking me, I really can't answer." He was like your mind is in a whole nother place. Because I was asking him about letter structure. I was asking him about, you know, the mechanics of building letters, and so he'd just be looking at me like, man. And one day he just was like, "Yo, man, I'm not on that." Like he goes, "There's a writer that lives about a mile from here. You need to go check him out. You need to find him." And I'm like, "Yeah, what does he write?" He goes, "His name is Dondi White." He goes, Go find him. He can answer those questions." And that was always in the back of my mind, like, yeah, okay, whoever that is, you know, because I was that toy. I didn't even know who he was. But, you know, I was on the path.
Okay, what crews are you down with?
Well, you know, people put me in crews, but I don't subscribe to that. You know, a crew, the whole business structure of graffiti is based off of gangs. You know, the whole ideology of how graffiti crews were structured was taken from gangs. And, you know, you had your leaders or your prezes, you know, you had your incorporated, which was the name of the crew, you know, and you had people who could recruit to the gang, same thing like graffiti. You had your enforcers, You had dudes that, even gangs back in the days used to have a scribe that would run through the streets and tag the gang's name up all through their turf to let everybody know what the boundaries were. So the reason I mention this is because the whole purpose of a crew, that's supposed to be your family, because that's what a gang was. All those disenfranchised kids running the street, they formed their own family unit. And the same thing with graffiti crews. Your graffiti crew should be your extended family. So when I meet dudes and they take a tag and they put like 17 crews next to their name, I just clown. I'm like, you're a clown. Like, go over there, man. Like, I can't even take you seriously. So like, the one and only crew that I really subscribe to, that I'm in 100%, no ifs, ands, or buts, is the Cool Five. And that's a crew I've been down with since like '84. And there's other crews I'm in, but that's my main shit stain. You know what I'm saying? Like, I everything else is secondary to that. But I'm also in like the Def Squad. I'm also in First Class, International Bombing Masters. There's a few crews that I'm officially in, but the main thing that I rock is TC5.
Okay. Speaking of TC5, I heard it started off as the Crazy Five and then the Cool Five after
Yep.
Comet passed it to Lil Scene. How did you get put down with TC5?
All right. Well, like you said, the crew was started by a guy named Death, and the Crazy Five was Death, Tull 13, Karachi, Blade. Let me get this. Karachi, Tull, Death, Vam, and Blade. That was the Crazy Five, and then other dudes got put down later on. And
So Comet wasn't a part of the original?
I don't think he was part of the first iteration of the first five guys that sat in a room and said, let's make a graffiti crew. But Blade and Comet were partners after that, and of course he was down. And there were other writers that were down too. And when everyone else in the crew kind of faded out of existence, it was just Blade and Comet left, and they decided to start a new crew called the Impact Brothers. So they didn't want to have that TC5 thing hanging around their necks and having to worry about it. So Comet was like, Scene, you want it? And he was like, well, actually, I think he originally tried to give it to Fade. And Fade was like, nah, it's too many toys in that crew. Like, I don't want it. And so Scene was like, I'll take it. He's like, because I'm going to do something with that. Like, he already had the idea in his head to change it to the cool instead of the crazy. And then it was reborn, like 78, 79. And then he brought it to art design in his first year art design in 78 also. And it just took off from there. So, there's a really extended history behind it, and that was another thing that attracted me to it. Because as soon as I saw it, I wanted to be down. I was like, I got to be down with these cats, because they was really colorful. They were characters. They were up. They had style. I was like, that's the goal. I got to get down with these cats, and we were all the same age. We were all born in '64, the original cats in the crew, and it just felt like something that was to be.
Okay. I seen a lot of pictures of you and Webb on the subway. How did you meet him, and what was it like painting with him?
I met Webb at Henry Chalfant's studio because I went to school right around the corner, and I can't remember what part of the '80s it was, but him and his old partner Staff 27 were hanging out in there a lot, and Staff was the same age as me, and Webb was like a year younger, or maybe 2 years younger, and they were hanging out in Henry's, which was literally like a graffiti clubhouse, and I started scheming on Webb really early, like the minute I met him, because he was hitting IRTs, and right at that time, I had made the decision to leave the INDs and jump to the IRTs.
What are IRTs?
The Interborough Rapid Transit System is IRT, and that's the numbers.
Okay.
Well, the numbers, and the INDs is the independent, and that's the letters, like the A, the E, the F, and there's also a BMT, Brooklyn Mass Transit System. So it was originally 3 different subways that the city bought and merged together to make the MTA, but it was originally 3 different companies that in New York City, and there was even more railroads than that fell by the wayside. But Webb was killing IRTs, and I didn't know anything about the IRTs because I never rode them. You know, my mother always rode the INDs, so I was just ignorant of it. I didn't, you know, when you grow up as a kid riding a train line, the first thing you do as a kid is you stand there and stare through the window. And after years of staring through the window, you start to notice things there. You start to notice they got trains sitting in that room. You know, the track goes off to the right and there's a whole thing of trains in there. You notice stuff like that. And then when you get into graffiti and it's time to go paint a train, then guys are like, oh, tonight we're going to so-and-so layup. And you go, well, where's that? It's like, oh, that's at us. Oh, so when you ride the train and the thing goes there and you see them in the back, oh, that's where we go. So it's like you learn. So being that I never rode the IRTs, I never knew, you know, where it was. And the sad part was the yard is right down the block, you know, right in my neighborhood. I had no idea because I never went over there. And so, you know, as we got to hang out a little bit more, I was like, I'm going to get this dude to take me to the IRTs. So I'm going to make sure we get cool, you know, so I don't lose this opportunity to hit the line. Because see, back then, the IRTs was a style line. That's where a lot of the dopest pieces ever done were done on the IRTs. So if you spent your whole career on the INDs, you literally could go unnoticed. I would meet dudes and tell them who I am, and I got pieces running. I'm doing whole cars, and they'd look at me and go, "Never heard of you," and I got sick of that. And one of my boys was like, "Well, maybe you should switch to the IRTs because that's where all the burners are." And when I started hanging out with Henry in '79, I think late '79, I was just like, "You don't have pictures of my stuff. You don't have pictures of the INDs." Like, every now and then he would go out there and maybe look for a Sonic piece. But, you know, he just wasn't really reaching for it. And I just was like, I got to switch up to where, you know, all the action is. So Webb was my foray into painting on the IRTs, like I said, which was the style lines. And my first IRT piece I painted with him. We did a piece on the 3 line, which is the neighborhood train over here. And that was like the next phase of notoriety. That's when dudes started to know who I was, you know.
Okay, did you ever go to the writer's bench at 149th Street? And who are some of the people you would always see up there?
Honestly, I only went up there once. And the reason being because it was dangerous up there. You know, the writer's bench was in the Bronx. I'm a Brooklyn cat. That's a good way to get punched in the eye or vamped, you know. It just didn't make sense for me to go there. Like, anything that was up there, I could see in Brooklyn. You know what I'm saying? Like, we had our writer's bench in, drawing a blank right now, train stations. Man, I'm getting old. I'm having a brain fart. Atlantic Avenue. I think it's called, it has two names, but Atlantic on the IRTs, we would get the 2, 3, 4, and 5. So there was no reason for me to go up there. You know, everything they saw, we could sit at our bench in Brooklyn and watch it. The only thing we didn't get is the 6 and the 1. But that didn't go there either. You get what I'm saying? So if you wanted to bench the 1s, you had to go to 125th Street and sit outside and wait for them to come outside. And then you could take your pictures and everything, good light. And if you wanted the 6, you had to go uptown. And there wasn't really nothing on the 6 that interested me to travel all the way up there and risk getting. Have you ever seen the movie The Warriors?
No, I haven't.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well I'm going to give you homework now. You're not allowed to interview another person till you watch The Warriors. Because The Warriors kind of explains how New York City was back then.
Okay.
So even though it's a high exaggeration, in a nutshell, it's about every gang in New York being called to a meeting. And at the meeting, they set this gang up and killed the leader of the biggest gang in New York City. And now they're trying to get home. So every gang in New York City is trying to kill them. And they wind up going through like a gamut of gangs trying to murk them. And they had to go a long way, all the way back to Coney Island. So New York was like that in many ways. So when you got on that train and you passed, like, next stop Manhattan, everybody would tense up and lock up and get on point, because every other stop, a bunch of dudes would get on the train and looking at you like meat. You know, like, oh, I'm going to take your sneakers. We getting them sunglasses. The Kazals are mine. The hat, that's yours. You could get the boom box. And we would literally have to fight our way up and fight our way down. So, if there was no reason for me to go to these other boroughs and these other neighborhoods, you know, I mean, it was so bad back then in the 70s. We would call each other and do a check every morning to see how big the crew was going to be to get on the train to go to school. If enough dudes wasn't going, we didn't go to school that day. Especially if a heavy hitter, you know, a dude that had hand skills, if too many of them wasn't going, we wasn't going to school. Nah, we cutting school. We gonna stay in the neighborhood. Because you literally, the dudes would just fight each other all the way up and all the way back. And we would all exhale like, whew, next stop J Street. All right, we hitting Brooklyn. You know, like Brooklyn. Because High Street didn't count. But, you know, we get to J Street and everybody's shoulders relax. Like we back in, you know, we back home. And to really understand how ridiculous it was, you need to watch this movie, The Warriors. We did that every single day. Not to that level of violence, but, you know, it was a little bugged out. So, you know, the bench was never really my concern. There was nothing romantic about it that I just had to be there. You know what I'm saying? So in my early career, the only time I ever went up there was when Henry was filming Star Wars. You know.
Okay. What lines did you write on, and did you king any?
Well, the funny thing is, in New York we have switch ups, where they'll take a train and they'll take it from like the J's to the M's to the L's, and you know, some dudes will count that and say, well, my piece ran on the L, so I was up, you know, I counted. But like I hit my early career the A's and the C's, and those would switch up to the G train. I never went to a G layup and hit a G, but my stuff wound up on the G's from the C line. And every now and then, something I did on the A's would wind up on the E's and the F's. That didn't happen too often, but every now and then it would happen. But I never hit the E's and the F's. As far as the IRTs, I officially hit the 3s, 2s, and 5s. and the 4s. Those were all in my yard. And then I went uptown and caught the 1 line. Never hit the 6 officially. Every time I caught anything on the Lex line, it was a 4. And as far as the BMTs, I never hit a J train, I never hit an M, and I never hit an L train. But I went to this layup that kept shuttle trains in it. And whenever we would do a shuttle train, it could wind up anywhere. You know, they would put it on the M's, they would put on the J's, they would put on the L's, they would put on the R flats. So, you know, that's how I got around, you know. But like, I never hit a D train, I never hit a Q, I never hit I don't know what's left. But I did enough that my work switched around to the lines that I didn't hit. And as far as kinging is a funny thing. Because there's a lot of dudes that say, yeah, I king this and I king that. It's all bullshit. Because back at that time, the real kings were the bombers. You know, you didn't king a line by doing pieces. You had to have crazy insides and you had to have crazy outsides, throwies and floaters. So I always tell people, when I was a kid, RTW and TMB ran the line that I was on, and they were just mass destruction. You couldn't really keep up with them. But every now and then they would leave the line and go somewhere else, like jump to the IRTs or the BMTs. And that would give us like a couple of months to like really get up. And it was funny, every time we got to the point where we was about the king, like Is, Quick, Men, Satch, all them cats would just be like, oh, y'all think y'all up? And they would come in one night and just destroy it, take the whole line back over. It was hilarious. So, you know, I might have been a king for like a week or two, but whatever that means. But I could never say I was no undisputed king of nothing, you know, because it was just too much competition. You know, as at a time, there was a time when TC5 was hitting the 3 line really hard. And we had like the most pieces running on it, you know. But there's still some kid that did throw-ups that was more up than us, you know, so.
Okay, while painting at the 1, did you ever run with the BALLBUSTERS?
No, I did not. Because I only went 3 times. And it was very orchestrated and very tactical how we did it. And it was me and Webb. And I had been riding the train. I was working in Manhattan at the time, in the Bronx. So I was riding the train, the 1, a lot. And I was studying the layup at different hours of the day, different hours of the night. And I had surmised that this is the time to go. Nobody was going, no activity. And we did like 3 pieces and we got out. But I've had friends that got jumped in there by the BALLBUSTERS. I have friends that got knives and guns pulled on them, you know. It's just one of those things because, you know, they really had 0 to do with graffiti. They had like maybe 1 or 2 dudes that was cool with them and maybe 1 dude in the crew that was a writer. But they just had this thing about going downstairs in the tunnel and sticking up writers and beating them up, you know. I mean, I look back at it now and I go, that was some real cornball shit because it's like, why don't you go do some real gang shit? You get what I'm saying? Why don't you go rumble with some cats that are challenge? You get what I'm saying? Like, what was the honor in 10 dudes with baseball bats, chains, and knives and a gun or 2 coming down into the layup and attacking graffiti writers. It was just the most asinine, ass backwards, stupid thing you could imagine, but it happened. You know, and for many years they made the layup intolerable. Like you had to look over your, like, we talking early 70s, no problem. 80s, you know, mid 80s, BALLBUSTERS ruined everything. Then they went away and then it got good again, you know. But I don't know. But it's, you know, it just goes all back to the gangs in New York, you know, and how they fit into everything. And they were very, very possessive of that layup. You know, 137th Street, 145th. You know, they seen guys going, they were always watching it. They were always riding the train. Like, if they had nothing better to do, they'd hop on the train, put their eyes to the windows, roll through, see if they smelled paint. If somebody was in there, they'd get off at 145th Street, walk back into the tunnel, and just start rumbling with people. It's just, it was just stupid. Like, it would be different to me if they were vamping people for their paint and beating them up, and then they take your paint and then do something productive with it. You know, then you go, oh, okay, that's how they operate. But they, like I said, they weren't the writers. There was like maybe one guy, I think Baby Rock might have been down with the BALLBUSTERS, but he was the only dude that I could think of offhand that was well known as a writer. You know, and I'm sure there were more, but I don't know. It was just really ridiculous to me, you know, that there was just one place that everybody wanted to paint and nobody could go. You know what I mean? Because next to the 2s and 5s, the 1s was like the next hot line that all the style writers wanted to hit. You know, 2s and 5s were first, but the 1 was like a close second, you know. And, you know, so, like, I personally, if I had never did a piece on the 1 train, I would have felt like something was missing in my career. I just would have. You know, everybody would always get a little misty-eyed talking about the 1 tunnel, and I'd be like, I gotta go. I gotta go. So when we did it, I did my 3 joints and I was out. Never looked back.
Okay, what was your peak years on the subway?
I would say 84 to 88. That's when I did all the damage that everyone's aware of. You know, when I started writing Arab and I switched to the IRTs and I was, you know, with all the TC5 flashiness and, you know, all the stuff that's documented is really 84 to 88. You know, none of my I&D stuff was ever documented. You know, all the trades I painted over there, no one ever saw it. No one ever took pictures. So I would say my most prolific years was 84 to 88 on the trains.
Okay, who was your biggest rivalries on the subway?
None. I didn't do that.
Okay.
I didn't really do that. I mean, like, I would use other crews as inspiration. You understand what I'm saying? But I didn't have, there was no contest or beef or any, you know, drama. You know, like I used to love it when all the Tats Crew shit would come downtown and we'd see it on the IRTs and we'd be like, oh, okay. This Saturday we're going to go do something better than that. You know, because they were, at that time, painting a lot, and so were we. So, you know, that's the closest you could say to a rivalry, but it was no drama. It was just, I was just using it for inspiration. Like, oh, that's a dope car. Next week, we're gonna beat that, you know. But I was never one of those people that had problems with anybody. You know, I didn't believe in that. That was counterproductive to me.
Did you ever battle anyone on the subway?
Yeah. Everyone I ever painted with. I mean, if you're not battling, then what's the point?
Okay, what was your memories of DONDI, and was there any advice that he gave to you about graffiti and style?
Not overtly. You know, like he never said, you know, 1 + 1 = 2 or first A, B, then C. You know, he never held my hand and showed me anything, because I think by the time I came around, he realized that his light was too bright. Like he would blind people with his abilities, you know. And I think by the time I came around, he just realized just let it happen organically. So he just was himself, you know. He never would say, "I want you to do this or try this," or it's like either you see it or you don't. You know what I mean? And you know, as far as advice, he would just like say, if I did a train on Saturday, he lived a couple of blocks down, and the train went right by his rooftop. And he would sit out there. I'd call him up and say, we did some cars, and he'd go, okay, I'm gonna go sit on the roof and watch him. And he would just be like, okay, I see what you guys are doing. You might say, those colors were a little too dark for that outline, or maybe you should go a little bigger. You know, I remember he frowned on 3-man cars or 4-man cars. And he would be like, don't do that. He goes, everybody 2-man to a car. You know, it gives a piece more room to breathe, you know. Things like that. Like, he was very astute as to presentation. And you can see it in his work, you know. It never looked like it didn't belong there. You know, so as far as advice goes, that was like the gist of it. Anything above that was just us hanging out, you know. And me just getting the radiation of knowledge from him.
Okay, I'm sure you have a lot of stories. Tell us your favorite raid story or chase story, and who was there with you.
Yeah, there were many. But I think the most scariest raid story would be down the block over here at New Lots. And I was supposed to do a whole car window down with a writer named Race. He wrote Skate 2 also. And he was supposed to meet me about 5 blocks down at a payphone back when I lived in the projects over there. And we had set rules of what time to go to the yard and what time to leave the yard. So from just us observing the yard and the movements and how busy it would get or be non-busy, you know, we tried to get in the yard, you know, between 12 and 1. So maybe 11:30 to 11:30 the earliest, and we would be out of the yard by like 3 and change. And for some reason, in the summertime, the sky would turn purple over the yard. And me and Webb would always be like, yo, sky's purple, time to get out of here. Because that's like when the sun was coming up in the east, and he would be like, we just noticed that by when that sky turned purple, it was time to get the hell out of there. So Ray stood me up, and instead of me just canceling the bomb session, I stood there and waited for him. So now I didn't get to the yard until maybe 12 o'clock. So I'm already an hour and a half, 2 hours behind schedule. And so I took my brother-in-law with me, who was a young kid at the time, because he was begging me to go, begging me. And I was just like, when there's a good night, I'll take you. And it would have been a good night had we left earlier and arrived earlier. So I was like, I don't think we're going to do this. And he begged me, no, I want to go to the yard. Come on, you can still do it. This and that. And I was like, listening to a kid. And so I'm like, all right, let's go. We get to the yard, and he was like, what are you going to do? Now, I had this thing. I hate painting on a train and leaving space. Because guys were idiots. They would come and paint right next to you, like y'all did it together. And we were very funny about that. You know, we don't mix with other crews and other writers, you know. So I would always bring 2 outlines with me to the yard, depending on what you were going to do. So at that time, I had, if he was going to do a race, I was going to do a DOC piece. And if he was going to do a skate, I was going to do an Arab piece. So I had both outlines. So when I got to the yard and I'm looking at it and I'm going, man, I don't want to leave this space because he's not here. I looked at both outlines and I said, I'll do both of them. So I basically battled myself. I did a DOC Arab on the train, and 3/4 of the way through, I'm almost finished. My brother-in-law's like, yo, there's somebody standing down at the end of the train by the lights. I go, no, it isn't. He goes, yo, I'm telling you, I can see them. I go, no, there isn't. It's yard ghosts. You just seeing things. I said, you're so scared, you're imagining. And he goes, all right. And he kept walking down to me going, yo, there's somebody down there, I'm telling you. And I go, man, I put my cans down. I said, come on. And I walked with him to the end of the row. And I looked to the left, to the right. I said, see, there's nobody here. You're just seeing things. Maybe a bird flew past the light or something. And he just goes, no, I'm telling you, there was a man standing there watching us. I said, well, he ain't here now. So I go back and I finish the whole train. At this point, it's daylight. So we can't even leave in the shadows. So I walk out to the front of the train where the end of the rows were. And there's a man standing there. And he just goes, listen, don't run. Just turn around and let me put these handcuffs on you. And I looked like, whoa, he did see somebody down here. And I just turned around and just took off. And I'll never forget, my brother-in-law was so scared that his legs were running faster than his body, to the point where he was running and falling, like he was falling to the ground. And I grabbed him by his jacket and pulled him back up, and his legs were still running. It was like right out of a cartoon. And I just got him upright and let him go, and he just took off. And we're running all over the place, running under trains, around trains. And then that's when I realized they pulled out every train in the yard except the train I was painting on and the two behind me. And that yard is in the sky, so you can't jump off. That's a whole nother time. So you really shouldn't jump off that yard because it's almost like 2.5 stories in the sky. So I just told my brother-in-law, yo, we're going to make a run for it. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, we're going to make a run for it. And he's like, what do you, I said, just wherever I go, you follow me. And we went under the train, looked around, I could see people, and I saw that there was nobody, because they didn't know how we got in the yard. There was a roll-up gate that we used to lift up. It would lift up just high enough for one person to slide under. So they were all by the fences and by the walls, thinking we were going to run that way and try to make a run for it. And when we took off, we were just jumping over the tracks like OJ running through the airport. Just all the way across the yard. They're looking like, where's these idiots running to? And then we run down the ramp, and they're looking like, oh, we got them. There's a gate there. So they didn't realize that we could open the gate. So with all my strength, I lifted it up. Brother-in-law slides underneath. I dropped down and bench pressed the gate up and slide under. And as I did that, a police van rolled right over me. So now I'm under the police van. And my brother-in-law is like across the street running. And I just remember I rolled under the van. The cop tried to stomp on me. He missed. And I took off down the street. And we made it to, we have like a interstate road here. It's like a highway. And it's got dividers. So they can't drive across. So we we ran across the highway. And we made it into the neighborhood, so they had to drive all the way around to catch us. And by then, you know, we were trying to find some place to hide, but they caught up with us. So I kind of just told my brother, I said, listen, run and blend in. I'm going to take the cops off your, I'm like, make them chase me. So I stood there until they saw me, and he booked off, and they realized, okay, I'm the one to get. You know, he ain't running. And as soon as they came close, I dipped on him again. And now I'm running through people's backyards. I climbed on their garages and I'm running across all their garages through the whole block. And I'm like, I got it. I'm out. I'm going to get away. I jumped from one garage to the other and went through the roof. And now I'm inside this dude's garage, laying on lawnmowers and tools and everything. And I'm freaking. I'm like, they got me. Where am I going to go? And so I had to kick the wall out and bust a hole big enough for me to slide through. And when I went through the garage, I wound up in an empty lot. And once I got in the empty lot, they kind of figured out where I had went, and all like 8 to 10 cars were surrounding the lot. And I was like, they got me. They got me. So after a while, they didn't come in. I guess they were trying to figure out, they really wasn't sure where I was at. So I took off all my clothes, down to my underwear, and just took weeds and put them over me and just laid there like I was in Vietnam. And the cops came walking through the lot, hitting the bushes with their sticks and everything, because it was a real dirty, lots of weeded, it was like a weeded area. And they were literally like 2 feet away from me. They never looked down and saw me. They were always like looking ahead. And so they walked around, and all I remember is in my subconscious, I heard 8 cars pull up, like screech and doors open. So I laid in that lot until I heard the cars leave. I counted it down, and I said, wait a minute. There's one car still there. There's one car still there. They laying for me. And I was like, all right, I'm going to stay here longer. Now, mind you, I'm in this lot for hours now, like 3 hours minimum. I got bugs crawling all over me, mosquito bites. I'm not moving. I'm hungry. I'm thirsty. It's a mess. And in about the 4th hour, all of a sudden I heard a car start up and the door slam. And I said, that's the last car. And I just waited. I said, I'm going to give them another hour just in case they double back and maybe pull up to the corner and they watching me from a distance. And I waited another hour, and then I got up, put my clothes back on, walked out the yard, and I'm just looking, and all I could say was, man, I hope this kid didn't get arrested. And it turns out he made it home. He was home sleeping in bed when I finally caught up with him. But that's the closest I ever came to getting arrested. I had cops chase me many times, but that was the time that I literally was just like, how am I going to tell this to my mother? I finally got bagged up after all these years,
Okay, in recent years, there was a TMT versus TC5 battle. How did that come about, and who won in your opinion?
Well, I don't really count that as like a happy time in my life, because what started out very generically, to me, I just found that it had like weird undertones. It started through Skeme and Scene. A lot of people historically don't know that there was a time when Skeme was Scene's partner. Scene was the elder statesman, and Skeme was writing with him. And a lot of people don't know Skeme is in TC5. Before TMT, before any of that shit. Before TNT, before all of that. You know what I'm saying? So, he was down with us, but, sometimes big brother, little brother, they don't see the same way. They don't see eye to eye. They bumped, I guess they bumped heads, when as they were growing older, and, they went their separate ways. And it wound up with them two arguing with each other, over I think it really started over characters. Skeme was accused of something. Skeme didn't like it. Him and Scene were arguing about it. And then all of a sudden I get a phone call, we're having a battle. And I'm like, alright, I'll battle anybody. That's what I do. But, I just felt it had the ability to have animosity. And it started out really cool. We made rules, which were broken immediately. The rule was we would paint one car, they would paint one car, then they would paint one car, and then we would paint one car, so that no one would ever have the advantage. And then we find out they're stacking cars. So I called like a timeout because it went into the winter time. And we couldn't be out there in the winter, painting trains. It's not like back in the days. If you wanted to paint a train in the wintertime, you went to a layup. You were indoors. 75 degrees in the tunnel. It's beautiful. You have your music, your food, everything. We're doing this between Tough City and Tad's crew. And they just started dropping cars on us. Because they had them in the bank, which was not part of the rules. So now we were forced to go out in the dead of the winter in the snow and paint those stupid cars. So I didn't really like that, And then, there were other dynamics. There were, some guys in TMT like Fed 2 and even Chain a little bit that had ulterior motives. They were salty about the 70s, I mean, much respect to Teen and K. They were very classy through the whole thing. I still see them to this day, gentlemen. We're friends on Facebook, But, I didn't like the energy of Skeme, how he handled the whole business of it, because, me and him would meet up and we'd agree on something and say something, and then the guys were doing what they wanted. And I'm just like, yo, you're in charge of this. You're the representative for TMT, I'm the representative for TZ5. We agree on something, that's the way it should go. And so, it is what it is. I just didn't like the fact that we had to go out and do this battle in the wintertime when they had stacked up cars when it was still nice in the fall. And I also didn't like how disrespectful Fed 2 was, running his mouth about, certain people and things that should have just been dealt with in the 70s, And then even, Chain, who I thought was like a really good friend, he just got a little salty at the end, because basically Chain and Fed hate Dondi, I can't imagine, it's like, you should have dealt with that shit in 79, you know what I'm saying? Like, talking about it now is like, and bringing that energy into the battle, and, like, what's this battle really about? You dig what I'm saying? And as far as who won, that's not for me to say. The people voted. You could look it up online. They'll tell you who won. The people said we lost one car. So that's that.
Okay, we covered a lot of things today. Is there anything that you would like to talk about that we missed?
Yeah, if you're gonna do this whole graffiti thing, just find your purpose. You can't be the best at everything. If you're gonna be a tagger, be like the best tagger that ever was. I mean, that should be your goal. And if you're a street bomber or a throw-up guy, have the dopest, like they are right now, if you ask dudes in New York, name the 10 most memorable throw-ups in history, they'll give you literally the same answer. Every guy will tell you, oh, you gotta count, like SE3, you gotta count, DY167, you gotta count, Baby 168. Like they're gonna give you 10 people, and you're gonna ask 100 people, and they're gonna give you a variation of that same list. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, be the best at what you're good at. Like, find out what your niche is and do it to death. And I see so many writers in this game that are not. They have no artistic acumen. They don't have it. but they're trying to do pieces. You can't do it. But hey, you got a really dope hairstyle. You know, why don't you, like, I know dudes that have hairstyles that are like artwork. Like, I could just watch them tag for hours because that's what they're good at. I'm not a good tagger. I'm a horrible tagger. I'm not good at throw-ups and I'm not good at bombing. But I could beat the brakes off a spray can. You know what I'm saying? I could do pieces. That's my thing. So, I mean, I just think we should, everybody in this genre, I won't even say art form, everybody in this genre of graffiti should be trying to find what they're good at and do it to death. You know, there's nothing hurts my eyes more than just watching a guy doing this for 10 years and you're still trash. It's like, you don't have friends? Nobody told you you're not good at this? You know? But I'll look through their books and I'll go, wait a minute. This guy's got a dope, simple style. His throw-ups is yummy. Like, wow. So why aren't you doing that? Like, nobody ever said, yo, you are dope at this. You know, like, even now that graffiti is so, you know, out there and everybody's into it now, and it's so mainstream, you have now this influx of non-writers that want to draw with spray paint. So maybe you could be the guy in the crew that does the backgrounds. Don't try to do pieces. You suck, bro. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that's what, like, I don't get what people don't understand. There's nothing wrong in not being able to do something. But what's wrong is you forcing the issue. If you're that dude, you're dope ass with backgrounds, and you murder characters, and you can draw everything with a spray can, you're the guy. You're the guy in the crew that does that. You know, if you're the dude that when he's tagging it, you could just hear music, then go around and tag the fuck out of everything. Because you know what? There's a place for everything. So that's my biggest thing, you know. And if you are piecing, you really should be trying to build and elevate. You should be trying to learn your craft. You should be trying to get to the next level all the time. Because I'll end with this. When we were kids, I remember one time we were sitting around in a group, and one guy was like, yo, like, if you had, like, any wish, like a graffiti wish, what would the one dude was like, well, I would like to have, like, 1,000 cans so I could destroy the line. It's a whole bunch of us that goes around in a circle. And one dude is like, oh, man, I would like to have, like, barrels of ink, man, where I could just tag the whole, every line up, be king insides. Another guy is like, oh, I want to go all city. I want to be all city king. And then they're all going around. When they got to me, they were looking at me and they were like, what would you want? I said, oh, simple. I said, I just want to be one of the best that ever did it. And they all looked at me and they all started laughing. And I go, what's so funny? You had your wish, that's mine. And they were like, yo, you know how many dope writers there are in this game? There's a million dudes ahead of you. You don't even rate. And I go, yeah, now. But the goal is to be one of the best that ever did it. I want to be on people's list, on their all-time list. And they're like, they just were like, that's not attainable. And I was like, well, why is it? Why is it not attainable? And I said, it's just work. And they were like, nah, it never happened. And you know what? They didn't aim high enough. Because all those things that they were aiming for, they all kind of did. It's not hard to get 1,000 cans of paint. It's not hard to go all city. It's not hard. It's not hard to tag up all the ends. Those aren't real goals. You know what they say? They say shoot at the sun and you might hit the moon. That was my logic. So, you know, here we are today, 40 years later, you know. I think I did pretty good on that, you know. And I still got a long way to go.
Okay, we're gonna end with this. Any shout outs to family members or friends?
Nah, just to the crew, you know. Everybody knows who they are. And all my dudes that just held me down during the years. And the many partners I've had, you know. Probably had 4 or 5 partners. And you know, I learned from all you guys. You know, y'all made me better.
All right, DOC TC5. Peace.